The space station is a new acquisition. I literally just got them this weekend. Blue Bricks is a toy company in Germany, and they have the license to do construction toys for Star Trek. So similar to Lego or Mega Bloks or something. And I bought a few of their sets just to see how they compare to Lego because I'm a huge Lego snob. And the Blue Bricks stack up really, really well.
Do they? Good.
No pun intended. No pun intended. I was really happy with the model, and I've got a Jem'Hadar fighter right here. I just built that last night. Great attention to detail. So nicely done.
Cool.
Nicely done, Blue Bricks.
Wow.
Beautiful colors. And what really impressed me is that they actually put. Let me take this off. They put the Jem'Hadar symbol, the Dominion symbol, right on the stand.
Wow.
Super cool.
Nice.
Super cool attention to detail. So it takes a while to get them from. It takes a while to get them from Germany. So if you're into Legos and you're into Star Trek, check them out. And excuse my cat. Get out of here.
Good. I'm going to ask. I'm about to give a spoiler for everyone. I know you guys have all jumped into a conversation. Everyone who's tuning in, as always, we always just talk, and whoever walks into the room, we keep going. Today we have some really special guests for you. I'm going to give a spoiler about Picard. Has everyone here caught? Is everyone here caught up on Picard?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Episode 4.
Okay. So then I have to ask, and so anyone listening, if you haven't watched Picard, cover over your ears if you want to for the next 60 seconds. How many of you caught in the post-credit scene that it was the Dominion language?
I did not until I saw what I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. He just Hillebrand posted about it on Twitter. Yeah.
How cool was that? Okay.
It makes sense though.
That is cool.
Now they're bringing in the changelings and everything, so yeah, it makes total sense.
Though I was wrong on one theory. I thought that the entire nebula was the link.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You should be a writer. That's a very cool idea.
Too. That's
Yeah. So
A link in space.
I know. Me and my wife were saying that was our going theory. But let's get started. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG and a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 site for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And of course, we now have with us Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody! Your intros get more elaborate every week, Michael. I love it. Hey everybody! Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment. Lo these many years. I'm also the co-host on this show with Michael. Lo these many 70-some episodes or so. Still working away at it. Still having fun, and we are super excited tonight to have the cast and crew, I guess, of Starship Tempest on here with us tonight. You see a whole bunch of screen names and faces on the screen. So without more ado, I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and I'm just going to go clockwise around my screen just based on what I see here. No particular favoritism or anything, because I'm still learning who all you are. So let's start with Ryan and Tara. Introduce yourselves, please. And as tradition on the show, tell us your respective favorite Star Trek series and your respective favorite Star Trek captain.
oh my gosh.
Wow. Okay. I'm Ryan Sheely.
I'm Tara Sheely.
We are the married couple in post-production and behind the curtain. I play Captain Maddox on Starship Tempest. I'm also the lead sound designer for Starship Tempest. And my favorite TV show so I'm gonna throw a little bit of curveball and say my favorite Star Trek are the original series movies. Those are my favorite Star Treks. In terms of if you need a direct series, I'd have to lean Next Gen. But my true love was I first started watching Star Trek with my dad watching the original series movies. So that's where my first love really lies. My favorite captain forever was James T. Kirk. But I gotta say, I am in love with Captain Pike now.
Oh, you stole mine.
He's so pretty.
He's so pretty. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to say right now my current favorite is Pike, because I just think what Anson Mount is doing with that character is very, very special.
Agreed.
Perfect. I'm Tara Sheely, and Ryan and I have 3 little ones that we try to keep out of the sound design of our episodes. We are often thwarted. I am Dr. Aurora Teal on the show. I am also Lieutenant Eel, who is a transporter chief now. And what is it Ensign?
I think it's
Is she
Lieutenant.
an ensign? Oh, it's she got promoted to lieutenant, though, which is delightful, and she's the pilot. So those are characters that I do at the moment. Much to Brian's chagrin, they were supposed to be secondary characters. And I can't tangle myself from them. I'm also our social media person. So anybody who follows us on, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the places, you probably have interacted with me before. And I really enjoy doing stuff like that and just reaching out and talking to people and artists and stuff. My favorite Star Trek series, I started with TNG, and actually Ryan showed me TNG when we first started dating. I refused
good man.
it, right? I refused to watch it as a kid because Star Trek TNG came on after Animaniacs, and that meant I had to do my homework. So no thank you to Star Trek forever until I started dating him in our 20s, and he was like, "You haven't watched any of it? Just watch some with me." I love
and here
Picard.
we are.
And here we go. I love Picard.
I promise this isn't a slippery slope towards anything. And now here we are.
It's not loaded at all. Love Picard. I've always loved Picard. But yeah, Pike has recently stolen my heart. So
he's doing that to a lot of people. First of all, and I love the accents. That is
thank you.
fun. How many can you do? I'm just curious.
Well, before I was a Brit for 5 months at the Museum of Science and Industry doing the Harry Potter exhibit, I could do about 16. Now I'm down to maybe 9 or 10 that don't slip into British eventually. So
Excellent.
Useful. All right. And thank you for both of you. Matt, over to you. Introduce yourself. Favorite series and favorite captain.
Yeah, I'm Matt Muller. I play Conrad Smythe on the show. He's the science officer. I started in the second season. I was not in the first season. I was a new addition to the show. Yay. So that's why the second season of the show really gets good.
He brings a humbleness to our crew that we
I sure do. But my favorite Star Trek has to be Next Generation. It's what I grew up watching, coming home from school every single day, watching Next Gen. And obviously my favorite captain has to be Picard because of that. So
nice.
And that's all I got.
Thank you.
So I just got to ask, how are you digging the third season right now?
Of Picard? I like it a lot so far. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Brian, introduce yourself. Favorite series, favorite captain?
Yeah, so I'm Brian. I'm the game master. I'm the poor bastard who had this idea in the first place and dragged the rest of them into it. So I play. I do the game master. So I do all the this basically the stories. Everything after our everything from our fourth mission of season 1 on is totally original. Our first 3 missions were from one of the compendium Modiphius compendium books, but everything after that is totally original. For me. And I mean, it's not imaginative, it's the obvious answer, but I'm TNG and Picard, that's like everybody else. That's what I grew up on. I grew up on both TNG and reruns of original series. Spock is my favorite character, period. So he was a captain. So I guess you could say Captain Spock is my captain.
Yeah.
But I've just been a Star Trek fan for literally as long as I can remember. I can't really remember a time before. I can't tell you the first time I watched Star Trek because I was too young to remember, probably. This was all kind of my crazy idea to begin with, and I've dragged the rest of them along for the ride.
We're going to want to ask you about that because this is, for those who are listening, we're celebrating the crew of the Starship Tempest. This is a really fan-based episode today, and probably have a lot of knowledge on how to get those first games started. We're going to ask you about that.
Sure.
All right, Matt. Oh no, we have Travis left.
Travis.
All right. Yeah. So last but not least, I'm going to assume I am Travis Sutter. I play the chief engineer, Nick Holden, on the show, which hilariously, the name, I want to be clear, was actually a reference to the TV show White Collar from way back in the day. It's the fake name he gave. And it was a solid 3 episodes in that I realized is exactly the name of The Expanse. And it just did not dawn on me, even though I love that show. So I felt a little ridiculous, but I had already picked it, so we went with it. For me, same thing. We all fit in age range. I grew up with TNG, so that's my favorite. I will give a twist in saying that, like, I feel like I really love Lower Decks almost as much as TNG, except for the fact that it doesn't really fit the same niche of what Star Trek is to me as a person. So it's like I enjoy Lower Decks as much as when I watch TNG because it's just hilarious and it does all of the things that we do when we watch it. But TNG is the one that's like, if I have to pick a Trek show, because Lower Decks doesn't feel as much like a Trek show. And then the captain, Picard, he's the best. So
I agree with you. I can't watch Lower Decks to relax. I have to be in a comedy mood. Like everything else, I kind of do it to relax, but that one's too hypey for me.
Yeah, there's a thing about like TNG, and to a lesser extent, at least for me, TOS, that it's just like it's the purest comfort food that there is.
Yeah.
Right. That's you put on something that just lets your brain relax in kind of this very particular way, and that's what it is.
Yeah. And in fact, I have you said comfort food. This is back in the day, right? In the 80s, early 90s, we had the ability to tape episodes, right, on the old VHS tapes. And I had gotten into a science where I could pause it and restart it at just the right time during the commercial breaks.
Nice.
But I was able to fit 8 episodes on a single cassette, right?
Wow.
And after like 3 seasons, I must have had 14 or 15 of these cassettes. And my best friend, my co-GM of the Star Trek game we were running at the time, one week he was just like super, super sick. And he said, "Look, I'm super sick. I'm going to be home for a few days. Can I borrow your tapes?"
Yeah.
Because he hadn't watched season 1 or season 2 or part of season 3. I was like, "Sure, man, I'll bring him over." So I brought him over to him, and he said he spent a whole week, drinking, tea and chicken noodle soup, and he binged every one of those tapes, those old VHS tapes. And he said it was so nice to be able to just watch it straight through. It was like, the precursor to binging, like what you can do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the original binge watcher. Good for him.
He could put one tape and he could watch 8 episodes in a row without stopping it or pausing it or anything. He said it was great. And we both had such a love for Next Gen at the time, and absolutely comfort food by every stretch. It's so great.
Okay, kids, Google VHS when you get home.
Yeah.
It's not that far removed.
A little.
Though I am curious, since we're all of the same age group, that's why we all kind of gravitate towards TNG. I pushed really hard for the rest of the crew. They kind of watched later, but like I love Prodigy, and I know Ryan and Tara's kids love Prodigy. And so like I feel like if you ask this question in 10 to 20 years for the next generation, there's going to be so many people that their answer is Prodigy because that's what they grew up with.
Yeah.
Awesome.
True.
We have 3 boys that are 3, 7, and 8. And we thought like the 8-year-old really enjoys watching TNG, or Ryan was going through Voyager recently, like whatever's on, he'll watch it. But our middle son hasn't really identified with anything yet that he is loved about Star Trek until Prodigy. And he would go to bed and he'd be like, "I want to know what happens with Janeway. I want to know how she got there and stuff." And we were like, "Well, did our kid just say Janeway? Like, this is mind blowing." Like, yeah,
totally. It's necessary. If you want, young men to grow up and respect women, they've got to watch Voyager. They've got to see Janeway in action. I mean, it's just like so respect, and it gets better every year too. Every time as it keeps up with stuff like
Janeway
that.
might be my second choice after Picard.
Yeah, right.
Like it's up there.
You make me happy. She's my number one, only being battled right now with Pike. And if Philippa Georgiou comes back, I will quickly replace her as my favorite captain.
Just to be clear, there's no Jellicoe fans in the group. Not one. Not a single Jellicoe. Okay.
We are all about the 3 shifts.
I appreciate the efficiency.
We are a 3 shifts household.
Although to Jellicoe, to Jellicoe's credit, I think the one thing I liked that character did was put Troy into a uniform. I think putting Troy into a uniform really changed that character for the positive. And I wish they had either stuck with it for the rest of the series or that they had done it earlier, because they wrote Troy differently when she was wearing a uniform as opposed to when she was wearing her counselor, leotard or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just, it would have been better for Serena or Marina Sirtis, I think, to have more meaningful things to do with that character than just be, not to be, awful, but like, set dressing on the bridge a lot of times.
Right.
They just gave her more to do when she was in uniform, and I really appreciated that.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
really interesting.
That's why I like Jellicoe sometimes, because he made her do that.
Oh, for sure. But like, so I think I think everybody would agree that TNG hit their stride in season 3. And what did they do in season 3 specifically? They altered the pajama uniforms for everybody on the bridge except for Troy. That's a really interesting point I hadn't.
Yeah.
So we took them more seriously at the start of season 3 just because they looked more I don't know, disciplined. I don't know what the right word is, but
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a more modern thing of like they were doing very episodic back in TNG days, right? So they weren't necessarily thinking of character arcs over the course of season and series in the same way. It would have been interesting, like looking back on it, if they had just kept her in a uniform from that episode on, it would have been a really fun character shift to look back after and be like,
Yeah.
oh, that's when she switched and did the thing.
Well, I found it most interesting too is when she started getting into the command program. I thought that episode alone
That episode's great.
was
a very good
wonderful,
one.
and I wish they would have pulled that in earlier. I for just thinking about Star Trek Adventures, it gives player options to understand that just because you start as a counselor doesn't mean you have to end as a counselor.
Right.
I thought it was a really good arc too. But you know what? Enough about Enterprise. We're here to talk about Starship Tempest. So I'm going to read it straight from your website for everyone who's listening, why we brought them on board.
Brian, have you updated the website?
Well, let's
whatever you're about to read, I probably wrote. So excuse me while I cringe.
Okay. Well, it says Starship Tempest follows the adventures of the starship USS Tempest, a sister ship to the USS Enterprise-C in the mid 24th century. Starship Tempest is set 25 years before the events of the Next Generation TV show in an era that remains mostly unseen in other Star Trek productions. So is that true still?
The Lost Era.
Yes, it is. It is still
That
true.
is still correct.
I think that's Jim's favorite era too. Am I right, Jim?
Sorry, you caught me on mute. I don't think it's my favorite era. I think it's my favorite unexplored era, because that's a chunk of time that like some of the novels have done okay, kind of like playing with it a little bit. But like that chunk of time between generations and the start of Next Gen is really kind of uncharted. Like we can infer a lot of things that happen just because of the Next Gen characters' backstories. But there's still just a lot of like the whole Klingon Federation Cold War thawing out and changing and getting to the point where we see Worf actually on the bridge of the Enterprise. There's a lot of stuff that could happen there,
Right.
and it just hasn't been tapped into yet. And it's unfortunate. Sure, I understand that Star Trek is has a huge timeline, right? And even after 56 years, there's still large gaps that we don't really know a lot about. And it's fertile ground for anybody to go explore, and that's what we try to do with the game. And of course, obviously, that's what you're all doing on your show. So
Exactly.
absolutely, hats off to taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So maybe Brian, what you could do is kind of give us a story, like tell us about what brought you to Star Trek Adventures, the ideas behind this game, maybe up to the session 0 where you convinced these fine folks to play with you. Give us that story.
Yeah. Well, so I first of all, I agree all about the Lost Era, and that's why I kind of picked it that as coming into this, the origin story is that I was working at this office with a friend of mine. We had a really long commute and we would carpool. And one day she was like, "Hey, do you want to listen to this, D&D actual play podcast that I really love, which was the Adventure Zone?" And that was kind of, I knew about Critical Role and that sort of thing, but this circumstance was the first time I really sat down and listened to a story in that format. And of course, I loved it. It's hilarious and they're great. And at some point, somewhere between Burbank and Orange County, I was like, "Hey, this would be. I bet if I got with my friends and we did like a Star Trek version of the Adventure Zone, that would be really fun. I think that would be really cool." And so I just mentioned it to probably Ryan first, and then other people in sequence. And it was like, "Hey, like we can just try this." I looked it up and. So this would have been 2018. So the Modiphius RPG system would have been, I think, a couple of years old at that point. So still relatively new and just kind of getting out the gate. So I bought the core rulebook and some other resources and just kind of like cracked it open. And I like to say that we didn't have so much of a session 0 as like session -4 and then -3 and then -2 and -1 and then finally
First ones were bad.
yeah, because it was definitely, so I had very little D&D experience. I had never GM'd before. I'd only played in kind of a couple of games and no real campaigns that lasted any length of time. Travis had a little bit, but other than that, like we really didn't have much experience in the very beginning. And so I was like, well, don't worry. We don't need to know what we're doing. We'll just start. We'll just have fun, and we won't start like recording and releasing and actually, making a product until we feel like we're comfortable, until like we've reached that point. So we must have done 3 or 4 like full missions before
from the book. Yeah.
From the book before we were like, all right, I think we're good enough, and with very loose definitions of enough.
So let me clarify. I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand. So you didn't really have an official session 0. You just jumped in with people, kind of got the feel for the game, and then had a session 0.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of like there wasn't really a defined session 0 in the sense that we just started. First, we did the starter mission in the core rulebook, and then I just started taking missions from the first mission compendium, and I just started going through them. Like I think the first one we did was the Forest of the Night with the ship that you kind of like the sleeper ship that you explore. Then we did with the one with the bugs that are being harvested by the aliens. We did that. And
we got derailed on that one very hard because you described them as the size of cows, and then we just pictured very large cow bugs. We refused to acknowledge they were anything but cow bugs.
It should be noted that we could have probably pulled together and had like a proper session 0, but for Brian to get all of us, like we've all known each other for 20 years. So for him to get all of us to play was like wrangling cats. Like you can't. We had another friend involved in the beginning too, who just would lob jokes,
joke bombs,
and we're like, can we focus at all? Or that's not happening today.
Yeah, I wrote a chapter about that in the player's guide.
You should. I mean, if you listen to the show as it exists now, you should understand that like what you hear is after editing and them on relatively decent behavior compared to our actual natural inclinations.
So I will say that we didn't necessarily have a true session 0 in the typical sense, but Brian sent each of us a link to some sort of online character builder for Star Trek Adventures. And so we all kind of ran through that, and that's how we came up with our base characters. Mm-hmm. And then through the first couple missions, we kind of got a little bit of a feel and kind of went from there.
Awesome. For people who are wondering what that is, BC Holmes maintains it. It's actually on the continuing mission website too. And
nice.
Character builder.
Yeah,
and
that's it. Yeah.
And BC does it out of the kindness of their heart. And we actually have an interview with them on continuing.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was a huge help to all of us right at the beginning, because trying to dig into the entire rulebook was very daunting. And so when Brian sent us that link, we were able to just pull that up and answer a handful of questions, and it kind of pre-populated most of the stuff for us. And so
I've raved before, and I will do so again I love the Star Trek Adventures way of building characters, and then how I'm sorry, I don't remember their name, but how that person was able to convert it into a web app is also awesome. But just I love the whole thing of like your stats are tied into story decisions, and they're like, it's not like, all right, decide which points you're going to put into which stat category, whatever, and now come up with whatever backstory you want. Like they go hand in hand together, and I just think that's the coolest thing.
That is cool.
So you like the life path better than other methods. Have you tried, for the purposes of this group, I guess, or in other games, have you tried using like the creation or the play as you go, create as you go kind of idea, or do you prefer to have that whole life path worked out ahead of time?
No, so the only other experience I have is with the traditional D&D setup of rolling for your character, but then also coming up with your backstory. And actually in the one D&D campaign that I played most recently, which was at that same job, I actually kind of completely punted on coming up with a backstory. I just decided my character had amnesia and made the DM come up with it, and then my story arc would have been figuring out what it was.
That was an option. I could have done that.
Oh, bad.
See, you got to think smarter, not harder. Wait,
You got to think lazier.
yeah.
So I would note that we actually do the sort of character creation as we move forward on all of our side characters. We all came up with our what we consider our main character. Me as Holden, Ryan as Maddox, our captain, Teal as the doctor for Tara and Smythe. But all of the side characters, including all the various voices that Tara does, we essentially just like, since there's only a couple of us and Star Trek Adventures has so many roles to play in it, when we would come up with something, it's like, oh, well, we need to do a transport. We don't have a transporter chief. Let's come up with a transporter chief. And that became Eel. And then we just, as we went through, we continually just added additional characters and sort of backfilled as we went. So now multiple, what we essentially consider secondary characters have values tied to who they are and experiences they had on the mission. So that was a sort of build as you go along those lines.
So let me ask each person. I'm curious, give you a chance to talk a little bit about your characters and also why Star Trek Adventures hits the mark for you. I don't know if any of you have played other RPGs, so make sure to mention if you had. But let's kind of go around. I always like to know what draws people to Star Trek Adventures, if it's their first time playing RPG or if it's becoming their preferred RPG, which I love to hear all the time. Matt, why don't we start with you?
Good.
Talk to us.
The most experienced game player of all of us is Matt.
Yeah, so I probably played more systems than anyone else in the group. So I've played D&D 3.5. I played D&D 5th edition. I played the old Cyberpunk 2020 or 2021. I can't remember whichever one, the original Cyberpunk. I played a couple of the different Star Wars ones. I played a superhero one. I played a million different systems. But the only one that is remotely similar, I think, to how Star Trek Adventures works is Cyberpunk, and that's just on the character creation front. Because when you create a character in Cyberpunk, you roll, but you're rolling on these big tables, and that sets your backstory and who your character is.
That's interesting.
Wow.
It's really a cool system. The rest of the system is completely different. It's like a D10 based system, but it's very different. Other than that, but the character creation is a kind of a similar thing where you're, rolling and setting your character up as a history of the character rather than just here's numbers on a stat block like D&D does it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never played Star Trek Adventures before Ryan and Brian asked me to join Tempest. So I was like, oh, cool, that'll be fun. I've never played it before. That'll be cool. So I decided I wanted to create a slightly different character than what we really see on the bridge of a starship. And I made Conrad Smythe, but I wanted him to be kind of an old man. Because in the era of Star Trek, you like you see characters living past 100 years old. You see McCoy in Encounter at Farpoint, he's like 130 years old or something.
Right.
So why can't a 70-year-old man still be serving on a starship? He's like, that's midlife at that point almost.
Love it.
So I had him. He's, he didn't start in Starfleet. He started in academia, as like a xenobiologist, an archaeologist, and, more just, basically a college professor for a few decades. And then he decided, I'll try Starfleet too, because that'll be fun. So he kind of went up through the ranks of Starfleet as well and is serving on the bridge of the Tempest. So
I love that. That.
Is now first officer of the Tempest.
Yeah.
Well, that's a spoiler for season 3. Yep.
That's a season 3 spoiler. But...
Way to go, Ryan.
So yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, and so and I'm going to ask, just because you have so much experience playing RPG too, I got to ask the narrative question: how Star Trek Adventures compares narratively to other games you've played?
It's different, I think, because it's much more narrative than a lot of the other games. Because a lot of the other games, you have here's your set actions you can do, and you roll the dice, and I either did it or I didn't do it, and that's it. Star Trek Adventures is much more open. I mean, you can come up with gobbledygook and technobabble, and
Yeah.
that's your
technobabble.
success. Like, like like Brian does it with us all the time. It's like, Brian, I want to do this kind of thing. Well, tell me how you can do it, and you can do it. I'll give you a chance to do it. So, all right, you're gonna bounce a graviton particle beam off the main deflector dish and such.
I love stuff. I love it. Yeah. Whereas D&D has magic, we have science and technical pseudoscience,
Yeah.
which works
Right.
well.
Right. Yeah, but you can't make up stuff on D&D. If you have magic in D&D, I have to use this magic spell, and that's how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Where in this, it's much more. Tell me how you're going to do it, and I'll tell
Player
you.
agency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have a lot more freedom. It's much more narrative driven versus stat blocks and dice driven.
Exactly. Tara, what about you? What attracted you to start? What do you find interesting about Star Trek Adventures STA?
So I had never played an RPG before, and we have friends who have done, LARPing and RPGs and stuff forever. And I've always been really intimidated. So we all used to do improv comedy stuff in Daytona a million years ago and stuff like that. But I felt like playing a game and or trying to use Star Trek stuff, like I will mess this up. Like I won't know the jargon. I won't be able to do it. I can't do the technobabble. I'm freaking out. I can't do this. And Ryan and Brian were like, please, it's going to be super fun. Please do this. And I was so very pregnant with our youngest. This is not good timing for this. They were like, please, 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 please. So we got started, and then I had the baby. So then I'm trying to keep him quiet while we're recording. I'm feeding a baby and recording and playing the game and stuff. It was crazy. And then 2020 hit and was what it was. And this was our lifeline. This brought us together. And so playing Star Trek Adventures together went from this thing that maybe we'll do to thank God we have this, it shifted for us. And for me in particular, it was all we had. We had 3 little kids and his crazy job and this, that was it. So
that's awesome.
It meant a lot to us, and it still does. It's still a major part of our lives. So
I know Jim has something to say about this.
That's an amazing story, and I've heard it from other folks echoing it, and me personally too. As the project lead and a writer and just a gamer of it too. The pandemic was really hard, right? And for me, the company was in a weird place. I don't need to go into the details, but everybody was in a weird place. Yeah. And a lot of our products were delayed because the supply chain was delayed and everything was screwed up. Mm-hmm. And all around the world, not just Modiphius, but everybody was screwed up. And it was my son was home from school because school was closed and we were all working from home and everybody was on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all this stuff. And it's oh my God, I have no connection to anybody. And Star Trek has always been a lifeline for me anyway. But Star Trek Adventures turned into a lifeline too because I could see people like you were playing the game, enjoying the game. I could dial into Twitches, or I could watch YouTube, or I could just be the shadowy person just enjoying the show right in the chat window. I wouldn't say anything in the chat window. I would just catch up for a little while when I had time, and it was such a connection, and it just kept me going. It's can I get through this pandemic? I don't know. But I had the Star Trek and Star Trek Adventures to focus on, and it's just I'm just grateful that we didn't want it to happen, obviously, but right. that we had this lifeline to keep us going was huge. Cool. So, Tara, I do have a question for you though. I'm really, really curious, and I think some of our listeners will be curious. You said you'd never played an RPG before, and you were afraid of messing it up, and you were afraid of getting all the jargon wrong and all that stuff. I'm curious, can you look back and identify what did you do to kind of get over that? Was it just a matter of getting into it and taking the chance and playing, or did you have Ryan and Brian kind of pulling you along? What did you do internally to break through that? Not to say it was a block, but just to get over that initial fear and just get into it and have fun.
Absolutely. Both and all of those things. First I started like, I would just put on TNG during the day and just like have some of that
Preparation
going in, absorbing. And Ryan and Brian would say, like, you don't have to worry about it. Like, if you don't know what to say, we're not going live with it. So like you can think about it. We can look it up if you want, whatever. And, the more we played, the more I was like, okay, this is fine. So I have anxiety. I've been, medicated for anxiety for quite some time. And part of my anxiety is just like being able to prepare and being able to, handle moments of the unknown. Right. And so having this show became like, okay, well, what can I do within this show that will help tame my anxiety? And one of the things that I do is voices. And so Dr. Teal, while she is my normal voice and my, that's my main character, all of these random other characters would come up and Brian would be like, hey, Tara, do a voice for so-and-so. And so suddenly had a British accent. And I was way more comfortable being Lieutenant Eel than I was playing Dr. Aurora Teal. And that was not the point in the original, but that's what's happening now. So once I was into those voices and into those characters, I was like, so I can just play with this. And Brian's like, it's like, oh, okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, what I like about it too is because, I was told by a therapist to go do karaoke because I was having severe performance anxiety. They said, you need to go in a room where no one cares. And in fact, the worse you do, they're cheerful. Like, don't go up there and try to sound good because then everyone's gonna be like, rah. So just pick crazy songs and do it. And I love that because we talked about that before on the show. It's like, this is a playground and everyone should be walking away having fun. This is not being recorded. You are not going to end up hired by Paramount. Maybe you might. Things are happening. But I love that you said that. That's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
We already have a track record for that, right? Bonnie Gordon is now working on Prodigy. So
she is, yeah.
She had a big role in not Clear Skies, but Shield of Tomorrow.
Right? No pressure, Tara.
Yeah, no pressure. That's fine.
Especially with all the accents. And she did voicing in Prodigy too.
Oh,
yeah. She in Prodigy, she does the voice of the computer, and whenever we have a computer voice aspect, it's always Tara. So there you go.
Don't get anxious, Tara.
That's what we call synergy in the business.
It's all good. We're good.
Ryan, what's your story? Was this your first RPG too?
Yes, it was. I had never done role-playing before in my life. I frankly didn't really have much interest in it. Brian,
role-playing game. You've
correct.
done a lot of theater and acting.
Oh yeah, yes, correct. Thank you for the correction. So we all actually have a somewhat background in theater, and that's kind of how we all came together in college. And then, as Tara mentioned, we did improv and things like that. So I've done performance art before. However, I'd never done a role-playing game in the past, and I didn't really have much interest in doing it. My creativity bug has been satisfied for the last decade or so doing sound design, specifically dramatic sound design in the Heartlife NFP productions of Our Fair City, and then later on Well. They have terribly successful dramatic podcasts, and I was the lead sound designer on those. And when Brian came up with this idea, he approached me and said, "Do we want to do this?" And I was like, "I got so much work I got to do on this other show. I can't." So it was actually the reason why it took so long for us to get from Brian's initial concept to our first actual episode was because my schedule was crazy and I couldn't swing it.
Yeah.
But
that was one of the reasons, not all of the reasons.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that being said, I didn't really have free time to do anything, to even consider doing a role-playing game. So when we started experimenting with it, when Brian sent me the character sheet thing that we were discussing earlier, I was like, "Oh, this is fun." And I sat down and it just fell out, and it just poured out of my head. So my character is Captain Maddox. He is a half human, half Andorian who presents very, very human, and so much so that he didn't even know he was half Andorian because his parents hid it from him because he was the product of infidelity. unbeknownst to him until he was.
But then what happened with the antennas?
They had them. So this is part of the thing. They had them surgically removed when he was an infant, and then played him off as full human because his father had an affair with an Andorian Starfleet officer, and so
That's so awesome.
Blowing Michael's mind right
That
now.
has so many social implications. I'm loving it.
Yes. So it just all fell out, and my favorite part about my character is that his mom is. The person who he knows as his mom is not his biological mom. She was, however, the one who raised him, loved him, but he is the physical embodiment of her partner's infidelity. And she never treated him with anything other than love and affection and motherly touch. And so Maddox has a very strained relationship with his father. His mother is his hero. And this is what I mean, where like it just all spilled out. Yeah. Because once I started, as Brian often refers to Star Trek as our collective, our favorite sandbox to play in. And I had never had the opportunity to be in Star Trek. And so this afforded me that opportunity. And it's the best. It is just the best. And to have our ship be an ambassador class. Brian and I are both ship junkies, and my favorite ship, my favorite Enterprise design of all time was the Enterprise-C that you only see one time ever, and a couple times you'll see an ambassador class come in and when an admiral shows up in Next Gen or something. But I love the ambassador class. When Brian said, "Yeah, it's going to be an ambassador class," it was just. Yeah. So
Brian had hearts in his eyes.
Yeah. So I came on board much more for the pure love of Star Trek rather than the pure experience of role-playing games. That being said, this being my only role-playing game I've ever participated in, I love it. And we played one session of D&D not long ago.
Our nephews tried to teach us how to play D&D recently.
And much to like...
It was chaos.
What like Matt was talking about earlier, like when a roll didn't go that way, I was like, I tried to justify why it should. And my nephew was like, no.
No, you lost your ear. You lost your ear.
Yeah. So Star Trek Adventures is my first RPG love because you always love the first one the most.
Yeah, I mean I love that. I know we're gonna circle back around and want to talk more about how, especially for improvisational actors, this is a social tool. I heard something the other day. I was reading a book. Forget his name right now, but it's View from the Bridge, the person who wrote and produced
Nicholas Meyer.
Thank you, Nicholas Meyer, Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country.
And
was talking that actors and artists do their best work when you're not supposed to talk about something because it's a way to get it into society. I just thought he said it so well. If you have a chance to read that book. So we'll get back to that. Travis, let's hear your take on Star Trek Adventures. Was it your first? Was it your first time, Travis?
It was my first time of Star Trek Adventures. I had played a couple games before. No D&D on my end. I played a homebrew modification of Exalted at some point. A friend of mine wrote the entire thing himself because he was a little crazy and made it all work. And then I had played the Fate system, which is very sort of just group storytelling more so than traditional RPG game playing. And so this was my first experience with Star Trek Adventures. I really like it. Like it's been brought up before, the player agency is a big thing for me. I like to be able to try things and see how things happen and try to like BS my way into making something happen if I want to try and make it happen. And Star Trek Adventures allows a lot of that. I also love that we've brought this up before. We've had some Tempest talks where we like kind of got together and just chatted about stuff. And Star Trek Adventures feels very Star Trek. It feels hard to kill people because they don't kill people in Star Trek. And it feels very like you are a crew that is trying to solve problems and adventure more so than just you were trying to like dungeon crawl to steal some loot type of thing. And so the way that it's built in there is a way that I really sort of gravitated towards. I really enjoy it as a system. There's a lot of moving pieces that we don't necessarily incorporate. I'm looking forward to someday trying one where it's like more strict to adhering to all of the little nuances within it. But I just like how Star Trek-y it feels. I don't know if there's a specific word for that, but Star Trek-y is the word I'm going to go with.
I think Star Trek-y works.
Yeah. And my character is Nicholas Holden. I'm the chief engineer. When we first were coming up with our backstories, I made my backstory. He's an ex Section 31 officer. I came up with his sort of big successful thing that happened, why he was able to pick his own ship. He kind of started to run friction of they're doing the right thing, they're doing the wrong thing, but for the right reasons, but they're kind of pushing a little too far for his comfort level. So he wanted to kind of just go be a regular officer for a while. And I kind of wrote that character in the idea that having a Starfleet intelligence background, specifically the secret Section 31, was going to mean that I wouldn't have to talk a whole lot about the background. And then Brian made it a through line for like all of the seasons. So
I've basically hung the entire campaign story on it.
So it is what it is. But yeah, so his character is a little shady. He likes to kind of keep things close to his chest. He doesn't always trust super easily. But he's a whiz when it comes to engineering and just gets super excited about challenges. And so that's kind of where I come from.
You're about to get some commendation from Jim, I think, Brian, because Jim's big on, as GMs, knowing the backstory of your characters, their focuses, their values, their talents. Right, Jim?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've always emphasized that if a player is going to go through the effort to create a backstory and to create really interesting stuff for their character, and they hand you that stuff either at session 0 or just over the course of the game, and they say, look at all this cool stuff I made up for my character. They're not just saying, look at this cool stuff I made up. They're saying, they may be subconscious about it, but they're saying, use this. Yeah. Like, here's all these plot seeds. Here's all these plot hooks. Totally. Here's all these NPCs I'm creating for you, names and stuff. Like, here's a relative. I don't really know what's the deal with the relative, but use it. Find a way to fold it in. And game masters, like as a player, game masters who take my backstory and actually do something with it, I just love them, because it's like you're actually listening to me and you're actually incorporating the random stuff that I came up with sometimes, and then it adds more player buy-in to the game. I find you feel invested in it. It's not just stuff happening to you because the game master came up with it. It's like you made up stuff, and I'm weaving your stuff into my stuff, and then I'm pulling in Travis's stuff, and I'm pulling in Matt's stuff, and I'm pulling in Ryan's stuff, and like you got this whole huge tapestry going on now, and it just makes everything so much richer. And I mean, frankly, and it doesn't sound like this is going to be strange to anybody, but like the best experiences I've had as a gamer with that kind of a thing in mind has always been Star Trek. Not specifically Star Trek Adventures, but like I've been playing Star Trek RPGs for forever now, whether it was FASA or Decipher or Last Unicorn games, or a bunch of homebrews that my group came up with, because at the time there just wasn't a system that did what we wanted it to do. So we just made it up, right? And just went with the scenes and the moments and whatever. And then Star Trek Adventures came along, and that was pretty great. But yeah, Michael, I absolutely love it when game masters work collaboratively with players to pull all those threads together and make something amazing out of it.
So Brian, talk to us about that. I don't know what you're talking. I was about to segue and say, tell me about how you said you've only used 3 modules. So I'm really curious to hear how you are building your games to keep everyone so transfixed.
Well, I mean, so in sort of my own kind of whatever the opposite of my defense is, like I've done that. Yes, it's true that I've done that a lot with Travis's backstory specifically, but I haven't nearly as much as I would like to, certainly with everybody else's so far. And that's actually one of the things I want to I'm going to really try to focus on in season 4, which we're going to start recording soon, and moving forward. It's just Travis, without realizing it, happened to walk into kind of what I wanted to explore with like why I found this time period interesting in the first place. Like you were talking about the kind of Klingon Cold War aspect of it, of the Klingons are our friends, or maybe not, but at least not our enemies, but not for only for right now. There's something like what drew me to this time period specifically as an interest of like I want to play in this part of the sandbox was the fact that like the character of Starfleet is so different between the end of Undiscovered Country and Generations and then what we see in Next Generation, right? Like the personality of Starfleet itself is so very different, and there's something in that like transition of Horatio Hornblower Space Navy to Age of Aquarius pajama explorers. Like, like there's a big character transition in the organization of Starfleet and the kind of identity of Star Trek in that. And so there was something in the kind of that like, Colonel Jessup, you want me on that wall, you need me on that wall kind of a thing that that's what I was like intrigued by. That's why I went. And Travis just completely kind of obliviously and coincidentally sort of walked right into that with his own character backstory.
I should have just done Amnesia.
What I like about it too is that you I consistently stress to people that the minute you start playing the game, you are canon. I believe that way. We claim our game is canon. Whatever they're doing on the shows is fine, but this is what's really going on. That just got televised. So what I like about that is you're creating in an era where it's your sandbox, improvisational, and especially for new players, if they've never played RPG before, they don't feel as constricted.
Totally.
And that was also part of it is a sense. One of the things I tried to like be very clear ahead of time was, what the decisions that you guys make. So we're 25 years before TNG, but you guys, the decisions that you make in the stories that will come up are going to change things, and history itself will play out differently. So that there was never a sense of, me personally, or just the whole operation in general of like, well, we've got to get to this outcome because that's the way it is in season 2 of TNG, right? Or we know that we're not going to start a war with the Klingons because that's not how it goes. Like none of that, like any of that would have been cutting off the actual like story power potential of it at the knees. So, and then kind of in that, along that vein, when I'm coming up with missions, I'm always trying to think in terms of character decisions and choices and dilemmas and things that have nothing to do with whether you succeed at the tricorder scan or whether your attack succeeds against so-and-so or whatever. They're always about some choice in terms of, a choice an actual human would need to make in a given situation. Like, the needs of the many versus the needs of the few, or, do you let the ends justify the means? Anything like that.
So you're playing a value-based game. And then, of course, I have to ask,
trying at least.
Right.
Have you met a younger version of Lwaxana Troi? That's all I care about.
Not yet. No, the only problem in that regard is any NPC. So we have had established, like we've had Picard in season 1. I actually set as myself a kind of informal limitation that I would only let a main character from a canon TV show be a guest star in our campaign once per season. So like we have Picard in season 1, Sulu in season 2, somebody else in season 3 that I won't spoil, but like I'm trying to, limit myself in that regard. But
Love that.
The flip side of that is like anybody who comes along, I'm going to have to play as the NPC. And so it's a matter of do I want to play that person? So we were actually talking about like, well, what if Pulaski's around here somewhere? Like,
yeah, she's only 90 years old then.
Yeah. But if we have a Pulaski episode, I'm the person who has to play Pulaski.
Let's be serious. You'll make me do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for the benefit of our viewers and listeners who haven't checked out Tempest yet. Is the series more episodic in a original series next gen kind of vein, or is it more serialized like you would see on DS9, later DS9 and Discovery?
So what I'm sort of trying to do is bridge the gap. So it starts off entirely episodic. Season 1 is all episodic, and season 2 is almost entirely episodic. And then the idea that I'm trying to manifest, and we'll see how successful it ends up being, but is that sort of gradually it will transition from one to the other, so that there will be a mix, sort of like, in the X-Files, you had, some episodes were Monster of the Week and some episodes were, the big overarching story. Yeah. And so I'm trying to kind of mimic that format a little bit.
Yeah, the way he's presented it to us as players is plot threads are starting to come together. And so us trying to go back, what do we remember from season 3 and season 2 that were sort of recurring issues and how those things might start like forming into a single coherent rope later on.
Okay.
And also trying to, in some ways, at some points, not all, but in some points, hide those threads. So like something seems like a one-off, but only later do you realize, oh, that actually connects to this, and hopefully in that way, do something surprising and entertaining and whatnot.
Foreshadowing. I love foreshadowing.
This will actually play off of our show. I think that's going to be taping, that is going to be showing a week before this one comes out. How do you keep a show Bible? Do you keep a show Bible? How do you keep track so everyone doesn't forget what happened?
Go, Tara.
Well,
we just started getting together more regularly because we would have these big gaps between our recording because all of our schedules are crazy. And just recently, Travis went through and listened to everything we've done so far and wrote out great synopses for us and some notes on hey guys, here are, if you want to do this thing, here's a quick cheat sheet of the what are they called?
Character points?
No, the thing and the thing. You need the upper thing.
Attributes
disciplines.
Attributes.
Oh yeah, we refer to them as the thing and the thing all the time.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
The cheat sheets for me, let's be honest, but I don't know the things I need. And so he went through and made this really comprehensive, incredible amount of notes for us. And so we went through them, and Brian read the first 2 seasons to us, and then Travis read the last season, and we really caught up. And then we were like, oh yeah, we saw those people in 2 seasons, and that character came back. I thought we heard his name twice, and whatever. And so we needed that. That was the thing that was missing for us, because Brian would be like, and then so-and-so arrives. And we're like, do we know him?
Oh, all right. Good.
Ryan and I at some point were talking about the post-production of wrapping out season 2 and how we were going to set up a cliffhanger for season 3. And I was like, well, we could do this because remember the first mission that we recorded for season 3, this happened. And he's like, it did? And I went, oh, you guys are so effed.
Hey man, hey Brian, we were just complaining that the only person who really remembers is the GM. He's alive in our minds, and we have to build these tools.
I don't know if I'm going to give Brian that much credit. I think the most informed of us was probably Matt, because Matt was the one who actually went back and listened to all of it once it was released.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
so I will say
I do. I think.
Go ahead, Matt. Go.
I was saying, I don't know if I'm the only one in the crew that actually I do. I listen to the episodes as they come out. Because for work, I drive all day long, every day. So I'm in the car for hours and hours and hours. So I do podcasts and I'll do audiobooks and stuff like that. So Tempest is just one I listen to, and every other week when it comes out, I'll listen to it. So I kind of do stay up on what's up, but we record so far in advance, it's almost a year in advance that we do recording from when it drops to when we record. So I've forgotten 90% of what we've done. And then the episode comes out. It's like, oh yeah, that was cool. I remember that.
Yeah.
So I guess it is worth mentioning, since we've repeatedly talked about how long it takes us to get these things out. Ours is not a traditional sort of Critical Role actual play where it's just us sitting there playing the game. Since Ryan has a very strong background with award-winning audio drama shows, he has a lot of skill when it comes to sound design. And so we go through, we take the full recording of what it is. We cut out, the 5 minutes of us looking up how to do a specific thing in a rule, cutting out those sorts of aspects of the game to sort of shrink it all down to be a much more streamlined process. And then Ryan goes through and adds all sorts of ambient background, environmental design, Foley design, sound effects, and works all of that stuff out ahead of time. So there's a much longer lead time, simply because we're sort of blending an actual play and an audio drama at the same time.
Go ahead. You're muted.
I just put myself on mute. There we go. Edit that out. No, we don't do that. We're much more clunky around
here. we're a one and done, one draft.
Exactly. We're appealing to the clunky.
But what you mean to say is you're smarter at it than we are.
I don't know if it's smarter.
No, I've listened to it, and I think what's amazing, it's there's another podcast that was Voyager season 8. I don't know if You,
Oh, no.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
but there's somebody who does Voyager season 8, and it's very audiobook style, which you kind of reminded me of, and it's fantastic. It's just honestly, I find it more pleasurable than sometimes watching the live cast where you have all the mechanics and stuff like that, because that takes you out of the story. And I play RPG for the story. I'm very narrative based, so I really like the way it's edited because I never get pulled out of the story.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
So one thing that Brian and I sort of talked about at the very beginning before we did it was, all right, well, are we going to do a straight actual play podcast, or are we going to do a full-on Star Trek audio drama, or are we going to try to do a hybrid? And that's really where we sort of landed, where we sort of blur the line between the two. And as the show is going to progress, there will be much more elements of sound design and production value. The production value increases with every season.
Yeah.
Who knows how far we're actually going to take that, because there is a limitation in time and ability, and we don't want this thing being released in 2042.
Well, it might be the animated series. It might be the animated series.
Well, we'd like to finish the thing before we actually meet the Vulcans in real life.
But every mission, so each mission, there's 10 per season. Each mission is broken down, as Brian mentioned earlier, into several episodes, ranging from 2 to 4 generally. Our goal is 3, but each mission starts with a cold open. So it's a completely designed audio scene like you would get in the beginning of before every title sequence of every Star Trek that's ever been. There's the cold open that sets up the mission to come, and at the end of every season, we also finish with what we call the cold close, which basically hints at the through lines that Brian's sort of talking about, and it hints at what's to come. It's sort of like a mini trailer or a sneak peek at what's to come for the next seasons. And we also have done something which I really, really love. There have been times, specifically one time in season 2, where we went through this scene as players. We played it all out, and the way it fit in the episode just didn't feel right. It was a fine scene, but it didn't really add much. So we decided, what if we take out that scene, put it in the front, and re-record it and make basically a live play, a recorded play of us doing that scene as our cold open. So it's us in characters, just straight acting our roles and acting out the scene, scripted as was based on the results that we did in our actual gameplay. And it was so much fun to put together, and it came together really, really nicely. So it's a lot of fun, and I hope we are going to end up doing a little bit more of that going forward.
Yeah, so part of it was like, sorry, but what I loved about the Adventure Zone was that it was, I mean, they're more actual play, but like I had tried Critical Role before, and I have ADHD, and so it was very hard because there's too much downtime in terms of my brain needing to be engaged, right? And then I also can't do narrative fiction audiobooks. I can do nonfiction audio, but I can't do narrative fiction because if you space out for a second, you lose the thread of whatever it is. There was something about the Adventure Zone that was like this very nice sweet spot of, it clicked with my ADHD well enough that I could actually enjoy it. And so that was kind of the idea behind trying to find a similar sweet spot for the Tempest, but also drawing on, Ryan's incredible skill and talent as an audio designer to, buttress the whole Enterprise in that regard.
Jim, did you ever imagine that players would take it here?
I mean,
in a good way or a bad
in
way?
In my head, like I knew it was possible, right? I have a theater background too, so like I know how a theater group comes together and how production is made, right? All that stuff. And like intuitively, when I saw the game that Nathan had created, right, I was like, this is so narrative focused. This is like Star Trek at the table. Like it feels like, it doesn't feel like you're necessarily in the Star Trek universe, but you are playing a Star Trek television episode at the table, doing all the scene beats and all the dialogue and all the snappy back and forth and cut scenes and all this stuff, and you got supporting characters. So like I felt like it was there, right? All the narrative elements were there to make this like a really amazing audio drama. And like, in fact, the group I ran a couple of years ago, like we were on Roll20 and then using Discord for audio. And like every single episode, I would listen to the recording and be like, this feels like a radio drama. Like we didn't have special effects and music other than what incidental stuff I could drop in. It was like, this game is allowing us to do a radio drama every week, where I can throw stuff at the players and like literally I could put myself on mute for 45 minutes and they would just go back and forth role playing, doing stuff, doing scenes on their own because they know the pattern, right? They've seen Super Trek, they know the pattern, they know how it works, and they can just go fly with it. And like there was whole sessions where we never rolled any dice, right? And it's just like this is perfect, right? So I love everything that I'm hearing because it ties into exactly how I run the games and how I play the games and how so many others are doing it too. It's so rewarding to hear that this system is clicking with a certain group of people, and it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
I have a question though for everybody, and I mean maybe Ryan and Tara, because you this was your first RPG, right? This was your first experience. This is like literally your first time ever doing any kind of game.
Yeah.
You didn't have that learning curve necessarily. You didn't have the kind of clunky start where you're doing the mechanics and you're trying to ease into it and figure it out. Like you've got some polished sound design. You're actually editing out some of the mechanical bits and making a more polished finished product. So my question is, collectively, can you step outside of it a little bit and think of yourself as a newbie listening to this episode, saying, I want to get into Star Trek Adventures. I want to play this with my friends, but do I need to have a polished presentation? Like, is that something we need to do? Like the pressure of a new game master and group of players thinking, shit, we can't do that. we can't do it. In fact, and I feel this, right? I feel this. Like I feel Shield of Tomorrow was really rough for me because it was like they got the nice LCAR layout, they got uniforms, they got props, they got sound, they got all this
great
stuff.
set.
Oh, sure.
That's why I was afraid to run the game online, even though I was a writer and the freaking project manager. I was like, I don't want to run this online because I don't have those production values, right? It's going to be like amateur town if I ran it online compared to what is out there. So I guess thinking about the newbies coming into it, what would you tell them? Starting to get into this game.
Yeah, I will say, and this is a very weird sentence for me to say, we have some of the coolest fans from all over the world, which feels very strange already that us college old friends playing a game have fans of our show still feels weird to us. We all have imposter syndrome, but we have had some fans that have reached out to us and have said, hey, we want to play. How do we get started? Like this exact question I have had in our DMs over and over again. And I say, just go. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't matter if you have seen 2 episodes of Star Trek in your whole life. Just go. You and your favorite people, make sure that it's people that you can get together with, semi-regularly so that you all can create this together and just go. And they do. And so I'll hear back from people and they're like, oh my gosh, so we played our first week, last week and it went really well. And, whatever. This person's not really sure they're into it so far, but, the only show they've ever watched is, Enterprise or whatever. And I'm like, well, we don't judge, just it's fine. and they have a blast because that's what it's about, right? At the end of the game, or at the end of the day, it is a game. And games are for fun and for joy and for togetherness. And that's the point, right?
I will phrase it this way as advice because it's the hardest. It's absolutely the hardest thing in the world for me to do. And Ryan and I are very similar wavelengths in this, which is probably why we work well together / sometimes unwell. Do it wrong. Like you're going to do it wrong.
Yes.
So just you have to do it wrong before you can do it right. Like you can't. I'm very much a perfection paralysis kind of like if I can't do it perfectly the very first time, then I'm not going to start at all. And that's obviously not how the world works in any way, shape, or form. And so it's do it wrong and then do it wrong again and then do it wrong again. And that's don't stop yourself from doing something because you're going to do it wrong, because you are going to do it wrong. And that's the only path to get to do it in a way that feels not even like is right, quote unquote, because what does that even mean? But in a way that feels right.
Yeah, it's a game.
And we went through that same thing, right? Like when Brian was pitching this idea to us, he was like, "Oh, well, go listen to Critical Role to get a sort of a sense." And it's like, "Oh, those are all professional performers that have played tons of D&D." So it's like we may have a performer background to some extent, but it's like we didn't know the game well enough. But those people can play full on game. They don't have to stop for 5 minutes to go look up a rule and go like, oh, well, my talent is this. I have no idea what that talent is. Let me go look it up in the book, because they're just much better and much quicker because they've done that sort of thing. So we had to overcome that exact same thing. So anybody that's listening to this, that's like, if you go listen to Tempest and you're like, man, that sounds really cool. Like we mentioned earlier, we did several sessions before we felt even comfortable enough to start recording ourselves. And it takes practice. And we did the same thing. If you think we sound good, you're going to sound good too. You just don't necessarily think it at the first time. It's like, get in, do it, play. And the more you play, the more fun you're going to have. And unless you're putting out a product to release on Spotify or whichever platform you happen to download podcasts, you don't have to worry about anybody listening. You're going to have a great time just playing. Like if we stopped releasing these things, sorry, Brian, I don't mean to bring that up. If we stopped releasing these things, we would still really enjoy ourselves playing this game together just because we enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't want people to think that, we talked about, going back to what Jim said about watching Clear Skies, or even, seeing people on Roll20 or Star Trek Tempest. These are examples that show us how we can play. I love a tabletop game now. I started playing tabletop post-pandemic of Star Trek Adventures, and I now see the advantages it has than Discord, where I usually play by post, is on Discord, like text messaging. So as people listen to this podcast, I want them to be thinking like, these are just examples so that you can see the wide range of games you can play with Star Trek Adventures. You could play in multiple settings like I do, online or virtual. What is remarkable to me, and again, I have to commend this group here, is because the passion seems to come first for the story. And then that pushes you to be like, well, this is our art form and we want to create more. And I'm excited about that because myself and Jim, if you've been watching the show or listening to some of the podcasts, we've had everyone from the comic book writers for Star Trek all the way to the ship designers that are showing up in Picard now. And of course, the whole gamut of gamers. And the worlds are kind of coming together so that I could envision with your show, literally at some point now with AI animation coming in and developing, that one day you could have an animation of this. And I like Star Trek. I've always liked Star Trek and Paramount because they're probably one of the most liberal with letting the fans enjoy the genre. And not just cutting them off at the knees because of copyright law. So keep evolving it, because it's just I think it's going to boldly go in amazing.
Just to circle back real quick. So when I need to work on myself a lot on the same thing that Brian's talking about being a perfectionist and just letting the product be done even when you don't think it's done, and to kickstart the character sheet. One of the things that I created as one of my character's values is failure is a prerequisite to success. And it's now the perfect segue to say that, like, to anybody who's trying to start their own RPG with Star Trek Adventures, like, just like everybody already said, get out there and fail until you make it.
Just do it,
because it's the only way to go.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting what I said earlier. I should have said it that way.
You should have.
No, I'm just gonna pretend that your thing was my idea.
I'm gonna make it,
We'll fix it
even
in
more
post.
succinct and say fail forward.
Fail forward.
Hey.
God bless it.
I think Maddox is rewriting his value.
So I know we've been going a little bit long here, but this has been such a great conversation. I had one more question. I guess this is oriented more toward Brian, and I certainly don't want to exclude anybody, but I don't know exactly how the sausage making happens in terms of the storytelling. But I guess I'm curious. Like, do you have a vision? Like you said, you've been primarily episodic, and you're starting to move toward a little bit more of a serialized story sort of framework. And just as a game master to a game master, because I'm always curious about the process that game masters go through when they're coming into a Star Trek game campaign thing. Like, do you have even a notion of an endpoint that you want to get to, or are you just kind of like just building it as you go, adding blocks to it, adding pieces to it, and you'll just see what happens? I'm just curious from your perspective. Like, do you see an end goal in mind where you would put the bow on Tempest? Not to say that we certainly don't want you to go away anytime soon, but like, do you envision a point where you'll put this on the shelf and say that is a complete package?
Yes, yeah. So I as we were first starting sitting down and kind of I sat down and first was doing a lot of brainstorming, but then I did want there to be like an overarching campaign story. It was, some aspect of like a DS9 style thing, or, a big bad evil, whatever the D&D acronym is, BBEG. So I definitely did want that. So I sat down. It's actually funny you asked that question, because just as we're sitting here, I'm just poking around on my desktop, and I found in my incredibly unorganized this little spreadsheet I built of myself. Of basically what I did was I set up some like hooks or triggers would be a better word, of that the characters may or may not pull in the first season, but if they did, that would set in motion some stuff that's would then be going on in the background. And as the campaign progresses, the big picture is like some of that stuff like popping up or poking around the corner in various ways. So it was very much, the first season was all episodic, but in a few kind of key places there are these triggers. And then thankfully they pulled all of the triggers, so I didn't have to go back to the drawing board on this big thing that I had put together ahead of time. But ever since then, there's kind of these gears turning in the background that sometimes they see a little hint of here or there, but which will hopefully kind of come into focus as the campaign progresses, builds to a very specific situation that I did, have in mind at the beginning, and then that will be the climax. But however the players and their characters get to that point, and then what happens at that point is entirely, open to, to the choices and how the campaign actually, unfolds, and what they do and choices and paths that they make.
Brian's whole apartment is like photos, newspaper clippings, and red wine. Just like
I have right over there. Travis has seen it because Travis has been here when he was visiting before. But I have a whiteboard with the whole campaign laid out, mission by mission, and I know, okay, in that spot, this thing has to happen, and in this spot, if they do this, then that's going to affect this, and if they do that, it's going to, etc. So,
I have to ask you a question then, just for again new game masters out there though. Have your players ever forced you into a rewrite because they came up with something better?
Oh God.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just so the way I describe it is like
he struggles giving credit to us, so it's going to take a while.
Absolutely not true. The way I describe it is that, like, you as the GM, you will feel like so clever when you're sitting and you're coming up with whatever scenario and thing, like, and you'll say like, okay, I'm going to make them go down a hallway, and then there's going to be a left and a right, and if they go left, they're going to have to do this, and if they go right, they're going to have to do that, and you're going to feel so clever as a storyteller and GM doing this. And then when you actually play, they're going to get to that juncture in the corridor, and instead of going left or right, they're going to crawl up the wall, and you're going to be like, all right, so absolutely. And I can't really go into any detail because that will
I understand. I just, for those who are, I'll say for Ryan and Tara that this is your first time playing RPG, and I've been playing for over 30 years, and my players know I'm totally a diva. Is that as a game master, we need a lot of praise, and a lot of to keep us going. So Ryan seems the same.
I think we also started striking a balance where you could definitely tell the first couple missions where we basically argue with Brian about the premise of the episode for like solid 20 minutes, where it's like, this guy's trying to run a test, and then we spend 15 minutes grilling that guy about the test, and he's like, we just need to get on with the test, y'all. Let's do this thing. And then we started we find that balance in between. I think us as players started accepting premises and sort of diving into the story a little more once Brian also gave us additional freedom. Once we started making all of the secondary characters animals as a joke, I think that just let us blow off some steam. Yeah. And so we were a little more willing to just be like, okay, we'll let you tell the story, but we're just going to make this character a cephalopod for no reason.
And there's also a very it's a tension, but it's a tension that is so just encapsulates who we are as individuals and as a group of friends together. But there's a tension where like I'm trying to come to the table with like my greatest Star Trek ethical dilemma, Sophie's choice, ends justify the means thing that I can possibly come up with. And then their goal is to just derail any sense of pretension that I bring to the table, which is a lot.
And that is why God created threat tokens.
Exactly.
Brian, but their name is Ensign Bees and their value is dancing.
Exactly.
Like, no.
And I'm trying like, but are you going to sanction this war with the Klingons because it could mean blah blah blah, but like but Ensign Bees needs to dance. And there's something about that tension again that is very us, but is also just it works very well.
Well, it's good. The glue shows, and I think you are a great example. The Starship Tempest of really introducing new players, long-term players, doing it in a way that brings your passion into it. We talk about how if you have artists or illustrators or whatever on your game, get creative. You're all. It sounds like two of you are sound engineers of some sort, if I'm correct in that, or just one of you.
Ryan and
Ryan is the. I mean, I have more of a generalized post-production background, but Ryan is the sound designer.
All right, so you're bringing that to the game, which is totally fun. Other people may have people who have comic art skills or just 3D modeling. We have a 3D modeler on our team.
That's cool.
Yeah. So the point of the matter is you brought it together and you're making the game fun and customized for yourself. I know here we want to hear about it at Continuing Missions all the time because we are the repository of ideas of all the creativity and infinite diversity and infinite combinations happening out there for Star Trek adventures.
Yeah.
Right. Jim, you want to ask anything else before we start getting to a wrap up?
I mean, I could do this all night, right? I mean, there's so many questions and thoughts and kibitzing and whatnot. But I am grateful for all of you and all of your time that you shared with us tonight, and just everything you do. I will get into gratitude in a minute, but no, I mean, this has been great. I could listen to your individual stories and your collective stories all night long, just to get a feel for the people, behind on the screen, right? Like we're seeing the people behind the characters in the show and stuff, and that's always, I mean, that's Star Trek, right? Because like they even back in the 70s they were going to conventions and you actually got to meet William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy instead of Kirk and Spock, and like you actually. For me as a kid, right, that was my first opportunity to really understand that the people on the screen were actually actors doing a job, right? And and you get to meet them and you get to talk to them a little bit in person. And you're like, oh wow, there's actually a whole person behind this role. It's not, that's like Leonard Nimoy isn't just Spock. He's got a family and he's got a life, and this is just one job out of many. And so I mean, me personally, I love peeking behind the curtain. And learning more about the people that are behind all the great stuff that's coming out. So
it seems to me too. Yeah, and it seems to me too, like the modern Trek actors, many of them are so accessible now. Like I just see these stories. I'm thinking about right now, Captain Shaw, who I have to admit is becoming top 5 captains for me.
I do like Shaw.
Yeah,
I like Shaw.
He's ending up in my top 5 right now. That he's so accessible, along with people like Bonnie or I was called say LaForge's kids, but in real life, LeVar Burton's daughters. That it's a really good time, and I'm not seeing this in any other IP, so it's a pretty amazing phenomenon.
Yeah, no, and it's great too that you mentioned Todd Stashwick. He's an uber geek and a gamer, right? And like
I've heard that.
When we discover that, it's like, oh, you're a gamer. It's like, it's so cool. Like, I know Anthony Rapp on Discovery is also a big gamer, but he's refused to do anything with Star Trek Adventures until after Discovery's done because that's his job, right? That's what I do. I don't want to do the game until I'm done.
Yeah,
I get that.
They've been doing Disco plays D&D, right? Yeah. And there's like a group of them that plays. I think that's fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. All right. Okay. Well, it's time to get into gratitude. Like we said, our conversation always continues because we never run out of stuff to talk about. As big as the universe is, so likewise is our imaginations, and therefore why we all love Star Trek Adventures. So we're going to do our gratitude moment. One of the things I like to do as tradition on the show is to give gratitude to the brick and mortar stores out there. We have to support our local and small businesses And it's really nice to see passionate people opening up stores to introduce gaming and comics to people. So I'm going to tell a story that my 8-year-old nephew told me on Sunday because he went to a local store and had a ball. He says, Uncle Michael, can you take me to King Kong Comics and Games? It's in Dublin, California, about 15 minutes from my house. So I will be making a visit there to make sure they have Star Trek Adventures RPG on their shelf in the upcoming weekend. So shout out to King Kong Comics and Games. Let's go around the room and do gratitude. Let's start with Brian.
Well, sure. I mean, I will give gratitude that both of my cats were relatively well behaved for this session.
They did destroy a mouse in one episode.
They literally, yes,
his computer mouse. To be clear, they broke his.
Not a biological mouse. Yeah. But to piggyback on you, I've been getting very back into scale modeling. This actually circles back to the whole like be willing to be bad at something before you're good, right? So I loved to build scale models as a kid, but I never like got, especially when it came to painting, I never just like stuck at it long enough. And so I've recently been getting back into that, and right like 2 feet that way is this Klingon battlecruiser I'm working on at the moment. But along with that, there's a local hobby shop here called Burbank's House of Hobbies that are like, they're super cool. They're not a gaming store. They're, a hobby shop, but they're super friendly people. They have a great collection, and they've been a tremendous help in like me, diving back into that's kind of scary, intimidating aspect in which you can spend an awful lot of money very quickly if you're not careful. And I'm not a very careful person. So
thank you, Matt. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Brian, and I'm going to say I'm very thankful that my 4 cats and dog were very nice, and the dog basically slept next to me the entire time. So that was wonderful. But yeah, no, I just want to shout out my local game store. That's Entertainment in Worcester, Mass. If I'm around, I always stop in there. I don't buy a lot anymore because I have 500,000 games that I never play. But it's always nice to stop in there and see what they have, and they have a good amount of stuff, and the people there are really cool.
Yeah, maybe they can do something where you go in and like donate to get new people playing, and then you can then start picking up new books.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah,
All right. Travis.
Okay, yeah. So I will shout out the creators and the people who keep Star Trek Adventures going, to be frank. This, I don't know how integral it was to creating Starship Tempest, but it feels like because it was a Star Trek focused gaming system, I think it made it a little easier for all of us to get on board, especially people who are not as experienced with gaming. It might have been a tougher sell to bring us on board with the idea of like, we're going to play D&D, but we're going to put a Star Trek skin on it.
Yeah.
Whereas this one was like wholly created to be Star Trek. Allowed us to sort of dive in a little more than I think we would have otherwise. In terms of brick and mortar stores, I don't have any particularly local around here. We have a longtime mutual friend who has a gaming pub in Florida by the name of Cloak and Blaster. It is in Orlando, Florida. Similar to us, we've all been friends since college for more years than I'm going to admit aloud. And he was with us in that same time frame, and now he has a gaming pub in there where they keep all sorts of games on the shelf for everybody to play and whatnot, and it's great. So Cloak and Blaster in Orlando is what I'll shout
out. Star Trek Adventures, and we sent Tempest stickers to give everybody that played a campaign.
Didn't they play one of Brian's campaigns?
I think so.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did one of the write-ups I did.
Yeah.
So cool. And I have to ask what your alma mater is. You all mentioned you went to college together.
Oh, I was gonna actually thank that.
Okay, so Ryan and Tara and y'all.
Perfect.
Go. All right.
So yeah, I would like to thank so we went to a highly technical school. We went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida.
I went to the community college across the street.
Yeah. But in this highly technical university where there was a severe lack of creativity available, we all found each other at through the Riddle Players Theater Company, which was the entirely student owned, student run theater group that was just pure passion. It it was theater passion at its finest, because everybody who was there strictly by volunteer because they needed an outlet. And that's where we found ourselves. And I stumbled in that group by accident, and now I have my best friends and my beautiful wife and 3 kids because of that place. So I would like to thank the Riddle Players Theater Company at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can't knock that. It's like your whole life. Just read it.
And for me, so when we started all the social media stuff, Brian and I were brainstorming. I was like, what do I post as a visual all the time for an audio podcast? Like, we don't have visuals exactly. We could make stuff, I guess. And he said, well, why don't you go like find artists on DeviantArt or somewhere that do Trek art? And I was like, okay. And I took that idea and ran with it. And now we work with artists who specifically do Trek art, and I promote them on our Instagram. And then now they're buying some ad spots so they can have, us shout them out for, like they have an audio ad for their visual art, and their visual art is on our audio stuff. And so I created this like symbiotic thing with some amazing artists, and I'm so grateful for the artist community and for the Star Trek fam that's out there that just is like happy to share and promote each other. And, they say a rising tide lifts all ships. And I feel like that's so important. And I'm so grateful that all these artists are like, yes, absolutely, I want to support you. And thanks for supporting me. And yeah.
Send me a list of all those people, including, I have all your links here, but send me all of it in one pile so I can post it with this episode.
Oh, sure.
Wow. That would be great.
That would be really nice.
That's awesome.
Our continuing mission.
Yeah.
All right. Over to Jim.
Oh gosh, so as always, I don't have enough time to thank everybody. I will.
We don't have a hook, so we're not going to pull you off.
But the Academy will play you off. Be careful.
If I had some Romulan ale, I would pour one out for the game stores that have come and gone, that have had to shut their doors for any number of reasons. They were always the lifeblood of the hobby and of the industry, and so thanks to them for laying the foundation in a lot of ways. And then other game stores have come and gone. The only one I can remember by name is the Game Parlor in Chantilly, Virginia. Thanks to them for 30 odd years of gaming love. I always enjoyed going there. And then there was a store in, and this is way back in the 80s, in Manassas, Virginia. I don't remember. I don't even think the store had a name. It might just said comics, and it was like a serious, total mom and pop organization. But I loved it, and that was where I posted my very first ad for a game. I said, I want to run a Star Trek RPG. I'm looking for people who are 18 or older, a little bit mature, a little bit, in the Star Trek zone. And I met my best friend that way. And we went on to run some great Star Trek games. So thanks to that game store and whoever ran it. I don't remember who you are, but thank you for that happening. I also, just tying into the theater, I want to thank all the local community theater groups in the metropolitan Northern Virginia area. There's so many. There's Sterling, Reston. There's like 8 or 9 around here, and I've worked with most of them on and off over the years. That theater background gets into your head and gets into story, and makes RPGs so much stronger. Like the way I run them and the way I play them and all that stuff. That theater background, so huge. So really grateful to all of the actors and directors and staff and everybody else I've ever worked with, because it's all here. It's all in here. Yeah. And then I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't thank every one of you, because I don't have enough ways to say thank you for what you're doing, not just for the game, but for the hobby, and for new people coming into Star Trek and coming into Star Trek Adventures. They're watching your stuff and they're emulating you and then going off and doing their own thing. But like you folks and other companies and enterprises that are doing the same thing that you're doing, or have done, like Shield of Tomorrow and Clear Skies and ELH Mark 1 and all the other people that are doing streams and podcasts and audio casts and YouTubes and just all the different technologies, Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, TikTok. I'm getting into TikTok. I'm slowly getting into TikTok, but it's just fascinating that Star Trek Adventures, I've always said this, that Star Trek Adventures is the first Star Trek RPG that I feel like has really been able to harness social media or to be tied into social media in such a way that other games haven't been able to do. And I think it's an amazing, amazing experience to see what you all are doing with it. month after month, year after year, and I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. So, because you're keeping me going. Because honestly, when I work on the game at middle of the night at 2 a.m, I need a break. I'm pulling up the videos and the YouTubes and the podcasts, and I'm just listening to people enjoying the game and playing the game and creating their own Star Trek stories. And that's what I want for everybody, is to see that there's so many other games out there that you can play, not just Star Trek, but certainly other ones. But there's such a great experience that you can have collaboratively with your friends. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of you. Thank you for all you're doing. And please don't stop. Please don't stop. I need that story. I need more Star Trek stories in my head. Like after 56 years and thousands of novels and comic books and audio dramas and stuff, it's still not enough story. It's still not enough Star Trek story. And I want more of it. And if the game is helping facilitate that, then that's an absolute win for me.
Yeah. And as usual, continuing conversations is about the fans. Star Trek, I'll say it again, Star Trek, though it was created by Gene Roddenberry and many writers and artists and special effects people, it's really the fans who keep Star Trek alive as a genre. So that's why we're committed to making sure all fans get their representation on continuing conversations. So I really appreciate that we all connected, Brian, Ryan, Tara, Matt, and Travis, in order to have you on the show. And it probably won't be the last invitation. I warn you, we talk about a lot of cool stuff. All right.
We'll get you back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So until next time, IDIC.
Yeah.
Be safe, be well, live long and prosper. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you all next time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Anytime.
Thank you.